6 popular ground beef brands have just been yanked from shelves, with new warnings spreading across 18 states. But here's the terrifying question. If the beef you bought yesterday is already under recall today, how much of what's in your freezer is truly safe? The USDA's own data shows foodborne illness sickens over 48 million Americans every year. How many of those illnesses were brushed off as a stomach bug, while in reality they were signs of a contaminated food system cutting corners to chase profit? And it isn't just about one brand or one batch. It's about an industrial pipeline that can send poisoned beef across the nation in a matter of days, faster than inspectors can stop it. If safety checks fail once, what's to stop it from failing again? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Stay with me, because while the headlines may spark fear and anger, I'll also reveal safer choices, real alternatives you can trust at the end of every section. Number 1. Ada Valley. The headlines could not have landed at a worse time. On July 29, 2025, federal regulators confirmed that Ada Valley Meat Company was recalling more than 1,000 pounds of fully cooked ground beef because metal shards were discovered inside. These weren't boutique cuts for celebrity chefs. They were institutional-sized boxes of 20 pounds each, split into 4 heavy bags, the kind served in school cafeterias, nursing homes, hospitals, even prison kitchens. States hit by the recall: California, Delaware, Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were told immediately, do not serve, do not eat, return, or destroy. Imagine sitting down to a taco or meatloaf only to realize the secret ingredient might be a razor edge of steel. That's just Russian roulette with a fork. The company framed this as a precaution, but the truth is, Ada Valley has been down this road before. Past recalls in 2019 for the same problem, metal fragments in beef, prove this isn't an accident, it's a recurring pattern. Regulators once cited their plans for machinery hazards, yet here we are again, with broken bits slipping into the food chain. Think about it. If your mechanic fixed your brakes and they failed again, would you keep going back? That's the absurdity being served up here. And while lawsuits are still only whispered about, legal analysts warn that one serious injury could open the floodgates. Pull back the curtain and the scenery gets uglier. Ada Valley sources cattle from massive feedlots where thousands of animals wade ankle-deep in filth. Locals complain of ammonia fumes so sharp they sting the eyes, rivers running brown with manure runoff, and neighborhoods choking under the smell. That polluted water seeps into farmlands and fishing spots retirees once trusted for weekend meals. Cheap meat suddenly doesn't feel cheap when it poisons everything it touches. Add in the company's contracts to supply prisons, where inmates were served questionable batches with little oversight, and the moral rot becomes impossible to ignore. Once society decides one group can be fed scraps, the line of neglect moves fast, from prisoners to kids to seniors to anyone who can't fight back. So where does that leave the shopper who just wants a safe, affordable burger? The answer is not to accept this broken system, but to look towards suppliers that still treat food as nourishment rather than numbers on a spreadsheet. Regional outfits like Seven Sons Farms in Indiana and Grass Run Farms in Iowa, or branded options like Butcher Box, Organic Valley, and Neiman Ranch, raise cattle on open pastures and subject their beef to rigorous pathogen testing. Even larger chains such as Whole Foods or Sprouts now carry grass-fed options with full traceability. Yes, a few cents more per pound can sting, but when weighed against a hospital bill or the thought of chewing metal, it feels more like insurance than indulgence. After all, peace of mind with your dinner is worth more than any bargain sticker on a box of ground beef. Number 2, Organic Rancher. Organic Rancher, the shiny Better Beef line stacked high at Whole Foods, carried itself like the Cadillac of ground beef, with sleek packaging, organic stamps, and price tags that whispered, "This is safety, this is purity, this is worth the sacrifice." But in June 2025, the USDA ripped the mask off when tests confirmed E. coli, O157H7 in 1-pound vacuum-sealed packs of organic rancher ground beef. Produced in Vermont, sourced partly from as far away as Australia and Uruguay, the tainted product was shipped into Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, and Maryland, then rolled out nationwide. Whole Foods had to beg customers to return or trash their burgers, warning of kidney failure risks if anyone had already taken a bite. The irony is bitter. You don't expect a premium purchase to come with hospital instructions attached. The company rushed to paint itself as a hero of transparency by refunds for everyone, corrective measures, a root cause analysis. But step back and the pattern is familiar. Months before, Whole Foods had already recalled organic vegetables for E. coli contamination, an episode that first cracked the illusion that paying double equaled double safety. What good is a golden label when the food inside it carries the same microscopic monsters as the bargain bin meat at a gas station? The betrayal cuts deepest for those who stretch their budgets to buy what they thought was the safe choice, only to realize they had paid for risk wrapped in green ink. Behind the marketing glow, ugly truths creep out. Critics point out that organic and grass-fed often operate like stage props, words slapped on a label while the beef itself is cobbled together from multiple trimmings, mixed across continents, and rushed through processing plants where any single mistake can infect thousands of pounds. Instead of a wholesome farm-to-table story, what you really get is a blender full of global leftovers, stamped premium. It's the food industry's version of a used car salesman, promising the engine runs like new while it leaks oil in the driveway. Whistleblowers described inspections at organic rancher facilities as pure theater. On audit day, workers were handed crisp uniforms, equipment was scrubbed shiny, and managers paraded documents like trophies. Once inspectors walked out, shortcuts crept right back in. One worker laughed darkly, saying it was like polishing a rust bucket and selling it as a parade float. For customers who valued honesty, that showmanship was not just deceit, it was an insult layered over danger. And the fallout wasn't theoretical. A mother in California reported her child choking on plastic shards inside organic rancher beef, dragging the company into lawsuits alleging reckless disregard for consumer safety. Court filings painted scenes of quality control so negligent they bordered on parody. It's one thing to waste money on false promises, but another thing entirely when those promises send children to emergency rooms. The moral bankruptcy behind the label stings even harder. Whole Foods leaned into the cultural promise of better living through better food, pushing organic rancher as the crown jewel. Yet advocacy footage revealed cattle crammed shoulder to shoulder in muddy pens, far from the rolling pastures plastered across advertisements. To older Americans who still remember real family farms, the disconnect was glaring. This wasn't pasture-raised. It was marketing graffiti sprayed on a factory wall. The deeper truth is cruelly simple. When companies slap organic on a label, but outsource supply chains across oceans and disguise industrial practices behind pastoral imagery, they're not selling safety, they're selling stories. And those stories are expensive. The final insult? After lawsuits and recalls, organic rancher beef still sits on Whole Foods shelves, still marketed as a safer choice. The joke is on the shopper, except it isn't funny. It's proof that in America's food chain, scandal doesn't kill brands. It just pauses them until the news cycle moves on. Those who refuse to keep playing this expensive game have real alternatives. White Oak Pastures in Georgia practices regenerative farming and publishes detailed audits. Thousand Hills Lifetime, grazed in Minnesota, guarantees 100% grass-fed beef with lifetime pasture access. These names aren't sold as glossy illusions. They stand on transparency, third-party verification, and local accountability. The price may still run higher than bargain beef, but bulk programs and direct shipping often cut costs. And at least when you grill a burger from these sources, you don't have to wonder whether the premium you paid was for safety or just for a shiny sticker. Number 3. Wolverine. In late November 2024, Wolverine Packing Company, an old Detroit heavyweight in the beef trade, was forced to yank more than 167,000 pounds of ground beef off the market after federal investigators confirmed E. coli 0157H7 contamination linked to at least 15 illnesses, 4 hospitalizations, and 2 life-threatening kidney complications. Fresh packages stamped with "Use by November 14th" and frozen lots from late October were flagged, and the USDA ordered restaurants and institutions nationwide to dump their inventory. Picture the very burger sizzling on a diner griddle, the patty crumbling into your child's school lunch, or the meatloaf ladled onto a nursing home tray, all potentially carrying a microbe that can shred a person's kidneys like a paper shredder. Such a game of chance nobody signed up for. But the shock of 2024 was hardly the first bruise on Wolverine's record. Years earlier, a recall of nearly 2 million pounds of beef tied to multi-state outbreaks had already rattled faith in the brand. Back then, lawsuits piled up and retailers quietly cut ties. Fast forward, and the same storyline repeats itself. An outbreak in Minnesota, beef traced back to Wolverine, families left to juggle hospital bills while the company issued polished press releases. A 90-year family legacy sounds noble on paper until you realize it's a legacy of playing roulette with public health. Inspection records reveal practices that would make even a hardened butcher gag. Workers handling raw meat with dirty gloves, grinders half clean between shifts, logs falsified to show safe temperatures when the reality was closer to a sauna for bacteria. One inspector described beef trimmings hitting the floor and then being scooped back into the grinder with a shovel, an image so grotesque it belongs in a parody sketch, not in America's food chain. Older generations were taught to respect food, to treat meat as something valuable, but Wolverine turned thrift into farce, recycling filth as though the public's dinner plate was a compost bin. The corporate side of the scandal is just as ugly. Wolverine has long funneled money into lobbying groups that fight tighter safety rules. When Congress considered stronger microbial testing, Wolverine's allies claimed it would burden small business. Translation? They preferred to keep costs low while rolling the dice with consumer health. It echoes an old American joke. The company saves a nickel and the public pays a fortune. The human toll makes the betrayal impossible to shrug off. One Detroit retiree, already battling heart issues, wound up hospitalized after a family barbecue where Wolverine beef was served. His infection snowballed into kidney damage, leaving him bedridden for months. A meal that should have been a source of joy became a long-term nightmare. Multiply that story by dozens of families across the Midwest, and the numbers stop being statistics. They become the names of neighbors and friends. Even Wolverine's community footprint leaves scars. Local residents complained of wastewater stinking up rivers, describing the odor as like living beside a dead skunk factory. For people trapped in neighborhoods near the plant, many on fixed incomes without the luxury to move away, the company managed to poison both the food chain and the environment. You'd think an outfit so tied to Detroit pride would protect its backyard, but instead it treated the city like a dumping ground. And yet somehow the wheels keep turning. Recalls are announced, fines are paid, Lawsuits vanish into confidential settlements, and Wolverine keeps shipping beef across the nation. Ordinary Americans can't help but feel the system is stacked. One mistake on a factory floor could cost a worker his job, but a company tied to hospitalizations can cut a check and keep rolling. It's a bitter reminder that when it comes to meat, the consumer often ends up as the last line of defense. That's why the path forward requires more than crossing your fingers at the checkout counter. Alternatives exist that don't gamble with your health. Strauss Brands in Wisconsin offers grass-fed beef with rigorous third-party audits. Meyer Natural Angus in Montana commits to strict testing and full traceability. They're lifelines for people who want their burger to taste like beef, not fear. Number 4, Chomps. In March 2025, Chomps, the snack brand marketed as clean protein and produced by Idaho Smokehouse Partners, was forced into a Class 1 recall after nearly 30,000 pounds of its beef sticks were found contaminated with metal fragments. Packages of the original beef stick mild carried establishment number 6220A in lot code 25016, distributed in California and Illinois, but sold nationwide through retail giants like Costco, Target, and Whole Foods. The USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service warned customers to return or discard the products immediately. The idea of chewing into a convenient protein stick only to slice your mouth on a piece of steel is enough to turn a road trip snack into a horror movie. The company framed the recall as proactive, but the shadow it cast went deeper. Just weeks earlier, Chomps had agreed to permanently drop claims that it was carbon neutral after regulators challenged the truth behind its environmental boasts. The timing made it look like a double blow. First greenwashing, then metal in the beef. A brand that built its reputation on being clean suddenly looked dirty on two fronts. For older shoppers who tightened their belts to buy what seemed like healthier snacks, it felt like a cruel joke. Paying a premium for a product that could send them to the dentist instead of protecting their health. Digging into Chomps' operations reveals a troubling vulnerability. Ground beef snacks may look polished on the outside, but behind the wrappers lies the same industrial system of rapid processing, pooled trimmings, and minimal transparency that plagues the broader meat industry. Consumer advocates have long warned that trendy labels like paleo, keto, or Whole30 certifications are no substitute for real safety oversight. A shiny non-GMO stamp doesn't stop a shard of metal from ending up in your lunch bag. It's like buying a car because the salesman brags about the leather seats, only to realize the brakes don't work. Workers from facilities tied to Chomps describe pressure cooker environments where production quotas overruled caution. One whistleblower said machines prone to breaking weren't properly repaired because downtime costs too much. That attitude explains how fragments of equipment might wind up in finished beef sticks. It also exposes the cultural rot. When cutting corners is normalized, consumer safety becomes an afterthought. For Americans who spent lifetimes in union jobs where one mistake could cost employment, the hypocrisy bites hard. Ordinary workers face punishment for small missteps, while corporations shrug off massive ones with polished PR statements. And the lawsuits began to mount. Families claimed negligence after children found hard fragments inside Chomp sticks. Others questioned the safety of the turkey stick line, which was swept into the recall as a precaution. Each allegation chipped away at the brand's halo. What was once marketed as the on-the-go snack for health-conscious families suddenly looked like another industrial product hiding behind buzzwords. Chomp's fall from grace shows how fragile trust can be. A brand can drape itself in words like clean, healthy, and sustainable, but one broken promise or one broken machine exposes the emptiness of the slogans. It's like finding termites in the beams of a dream house. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Shoppers now question whether the wrapper is worth the risk, and the illusion of purity feels permanently cracked. Better choices do exist. Companies such as Crowd Cow provide single-origin beef snacks with full traceability to specific farms. Heritage Foods USA partners with small ranchers to offer pasture-raised meats processed under stricter oversight. For those looking at jerky or sticks, Epic Provisions and Vermont Smoke and Cure publish detailed sourcing standards and third-party audit results. These alternatives show that real transparency is possible and that customers don't need to gamble on flashy marketing. For retirees and working families alike, the choice is stark. Spend your money on brands that prove safety or risk paying for an illusion that could leave more than a bad taste in your mouth. Number 5. JBS Tolleson. JBS Tolleson has become a symbol of what happens when the meatpacking industry pushes speed and profit above safety. At its Arizona plant, more than 12 million pounds of ground beef were recalled after being linked to a massive Salmonella Newport outbreak that left hundreds sick and dozens hospitalized across more than 24 states. Imagine enough beef to serve every person in New York City a hamburger. Only these patties came with a hidden pathogen that could trigger kidney failure or land vulnerable patients in intensive care. For working-class families already stretched thin, that wasn't a headline. It was a nightmare hidden in the freezer. Inside the Tolleson facility, inspectors described conveyor belts crowded with meat rushing past so quickly that contamination checks were little more than theater. One whistleblower compared it to watching a meat river flow downhill. Unstoppable, indifferent, and just as likely to sweep you under as feed you. That river analogy rings bitterly true. A current that looks bountiful on the surface, but carries sickness beneath. The rot doesn't end with pathogens. JBS, the Brazilian parent company, has admitted to bribing more than 1,000 politicians worldwide, including in the United States, to shape regulations in its favor. While retirees in Arizona or Ohio budget every dollar for groceries and medicine, JBS executives cut secret deals to keep inspectors at bay. The contrast is grotesque. Ordinary people scraping pennies, while billionaires rig the rules of the very system meant to protect them. Labor conditions at JBS plants underline the hypocrisy even more. Advocacy groups documented immigrant workers denied bathroom breaks, pushed into punishing shifts, and punished for reporting injuries. Some workers admitted to relieving themselves in place rather than risk losing their jobs. If this is how management treats the human beings who keep the lines moving, what chance does the meat or the consumer really have? For those who remember union solidarity and worker rights as hard-won battles, this degradation is both a moral failure and a safety hazard. The environmental consequences are equally damning. Satellite data has linked JBS suppliers to illegal deforestation in the Amazon, forests clear-cut to create pasture land for cattle destined for international markets. That devastation might seem distant, but its effects echo in the rising grocery prices, deadly summer heat waves, and extreme storms battering American towns. A burger grilled in Arizona leaves smoke in Brazil, and the bill eventually lands on the kitchen table of a retiree in Florida in the form of higher utility costs and climate chaos. The human toll of the Tolleson outbreak is recorded not just in numbers, but in suffering. Seniors, children, and immunocompromised patients made up the bulk of those hospitalized. One Arizona grandmother described weeks of agony and near organ failure after eating beef traced back to JBS. Stories like hers transform statistics in a lived tragedy. This is not just unsafe food, it is betrayal plated with a side of greed. Yet despite all this, JBS continues to dominate. Even after billions in fines for corruption and food safety failures, it remains the largest meat packer in the world. The message is chilling. Scandals may cost money, but they don't cost market share. Meanwhile, the risks are passed down the chain, straight to the consumer who never asked to play roulette with dinner. Alternatives do exist for those unwilling to bankroll this global machine. Crowd Cow links buyers with independent ranchers, allowing full traceability of every cut. Primal Pastures in California runs open, pasture-based farms where customers can see for themselves how animals are raised. Heritage Meats. Collective in Oregon offers cooperative sourcing that prioritizes safety and community trust. These operations prove that beef doesn't have to come from faceless conglomerates. For people who want real assurance, knowing the farmer's name matters far more than any supermarket slogan. Number 6. Hudson Foods. Hudson Foods once sold itself as a shining star of American beef, feeding households through supermarket shelves and major clients like Burger King. But when its Columbus, Nebraska plant was exposed as the epicenter of an E. coli O157:H7 outbreak, the mask slipped, and the result was the largest beef recall the country had ever seen at that time. 25 million pounds of ground beef pulled from circulation. 25 million pounds isn't just a statistic, it's the equivalent of handing every household in America a burger laced with invisible danger. For older families stretching their dollars on frozen patties and casseroles, this wasn't a faraway scandal. It was a nightmare sitting in their freezer. The system inside Hudson's plant looked more like a recycling operation than a food facility. Inspectors discovered patties from one day's production being reground into the next day's batch, mixing scraps and trimmings in a way that made tracing contamination almost impossible. It was like tossing yesterday's leftovers into a cauldron with today's stew, ensuring one rotten ingredient could spoil everything. Regulators described the plant as a blender of contamination, and that metaphor stuck. America's dinner plates had been turned into a nationwide mixing bowl for bacteria. What made the scandal sting even more was Hudson's response. Managers downplayed the scope, claiming contamination could be traced to a single lot, when in fact it spread across countless batches. Federal officials later accused the company of misleading investigators. By the time the truth came out, the meat had already been eaten. Imagine the shock of being told weeks later that the burger you grilled at a family cookout might have carried lethal pathogens. For retirees already dealing with fragile health, the knowledge hit like a cruel aftershock, too late to protect themselves, yet early enough to carry the fear for months. The fallout reached every corner. Burger King quickly cut ties, devastating Hudson's bottom line. Workers at the Nebraska plant faced mass layoffs, while executives pointed fingers anywhere but at themselves. That hypocrisy rang bitterly familiar. The people in hard hats lost their paychecks, while the people in suits shielded themselves with press statements. For communities built on blue-collar pride, it was another chapter in the old story of the powerful sacrificing the powerless. Hudson's collapse revealed a bigger flaw in the meat industry itself: centralization. By funneling so much production into a single facility, Hudson turned one outbreak into a coast-to-coast disaster. It was like putting all of America's eggs into one basket, then dropping it from the top of a skyscraper. Retirees who still remember the days of neighborhood butchers saw the lesson clearly. When food comes from smaller, accountable sources, a bad batch doesn't poison a nation. The human toll remains the sharpest memory. At least 15 confirmed illnesses, children hooked up to IVs in Colorado hospitals, seniors battling dehydration and kidney complications. One class action lawsuit sought $15 million in damages, though it was later dismissed. Even without a courtroom victory, the suffering spoke louder than any legal ruling. For everyday Americans, Hudson's fall wasn't just a corporate implosion, it was a warning that trust in the food system could be broken overnight. In the end, Hudson Foods was absorbed by Tyson, its brand name buried under a larger corporate umbrella. But its legacy lingers like a scar. A reminder that shortcuts in food safety can topple even big names and leave ordinary people carrying the cost. The story of Hudson isn't just about what went wrong in Nebraska, it's about the fragility of the system that puts dinner on the table. Alternatives. Those seeking to avoid repeating history can look towards smaller, transparent ranchers who make safety their business model. Blue Nest Beef works with regenerative ranchers to deliver beef with verifiable testing. Lone Mountain Wagyu in New Mexico provides full-blood, single-origin beef with complete traceability, and brands like Porter Road offer pasture-raised meat butchered by hand, not churned through industrial blenders. For families and retirees, these options aren't luxuries. They're a way to buy back the trust that Hudson squandered. The real danger isn't just bad beef, it's blind trust. Stay alert, stay informed. Subscribe now for protection tomorrow.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our daily content. Now feel free to check out some of our newest and best videos currently showing on the screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.